Nearly 2.5 million Syrians are now refugees, giving that nation that dubious distinction of having the highest refugees population in the world. Mostly fled since the Syrian Arab Spring are uprising to disintegrate into a brutal civil war. Now Syrians' neighbors, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey are strongly accommodate the refugees. The influx put pressure in their economies, natural resources, legal infrastructure, security forces, and political goodwill. As a host nation, those governments have carefully tread the line between providing the humanitarian assistance and maintaining instability. Ultimately, it will take a comprehensive and unified effort from the Washington and the rest of the international community if displaced Syrians are returned home. Syria, the world's largest refugee crisis, next on a great decision. It started at hopeful time and early 2011. Protesters across North Africa and the Middle East rose up to overlap dictators who have ruled for decades.
That burst into public view in 2011 with the Arab Spring, even 2010 in Tunisia, really was developing over a period of decades. Those of us who were working in the region saw more and more signs of just general dissatisfaction with the status quo.
So it began as a nonviolent movement in Tunisia, then it spread to Egypt, and then it spread to Libya.
Ultimately, the Arab Spring is about not just young people, but people in general in that part of the world wanting to live in dignity. It didn't say democracy, it said dignity, and that means that the law is respected, that there is a rule of law.
Four governments, Indonesia, Libya, Egypt, and Yemen, failed, but in Syria, the revolution started. There were protesters remarking against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad peacefully.
It started out as a protest against the arrest of some adolescents, like 12, 13, 14-year-old kids in a city to the south of Damascus called Daraa, who spray painted on the wall what they had seen on Arabic satellite TV, bring down the regime. I live in Baltimore, we have plenty of graffiti. But in Baltimore, they don't arrest kids and pull out their fingernails, which is what the Syrian secret police did.
The early protests in Syria in March of 2011 in Daraa and other communities in the south, those were largely nonviolent, peaceful, and they expressed a sense of disenchantment that had been building up for 4 decades against the Assad regime.
It was mostly young people, educated, who went to the streets. It was farmers from a southern town called Daraa. It was merchants in the town of Hama in the middle of the country. And what they were protesting against was a government they felt didn't listen to them.
Decided to use force and started shooting into crowds.
And I always remind people, the Syrian political opposition marched in the streets for 6 straight months taking bullets before they even mounted an armed response. So it really was a Syrian matter, people demanding their rights.
Bashar al-Assad regime cracked down with a ferocious response and began killing a lot of unarmed protesters. More and more arms began to find their way to the opposition. As opposition became armed, and Islamists and jihadists began to play a greater role.
In Syria is 4, 5, 6 wars going on all at the same time. It's a war against the population of Syria against a regime. It's a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran that both want their own hegemony inside Syria. It's a war against Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite militia, against ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Sunni fundamentalist jihadists. It's a war that involves Turkey, that is also on the side of the nationalist rebels. And it's a fight between the United States and Russia.
The results, 140,000 people have been killed. An estimated 3 million Syrians are refugees. Approximately 60,000 Syrians flee in the country every day, according to the United Nations. They traded the brutality of a civil war for lives of uncertainty and country not their own.